Mr. Raul Salazar, who's the United Nations resident coordinator in Belize. It's the first time we have a UN resident coordinator, so we're very excited for this conversation, Mr. Raul. Today we're going to be getting to know more about the United Nations, what's the mission like in Belize, and of course, anything that you feel is important for us to add as it regards to the UN. Before we get into that, let's do a check-in as we always do. How are you doing this Wednesday?
Well, I'm doing very well. I'm very happy to be with you, Renata and Kevin, and thanks for the invitation to share with you some of the views of the United Nations, what we do, what we are, and what we are actually achieving in Belize.
Very well, and welcome. It's the first time we have a UN resident coordinator, so this is very exciting. So of course, viewers, if you have any questions, this is the opportunity for you to ask them, and let's get to learn more about the UN.
Yes, yeah. I think that's a perfect question right there, Kev, because, for our younger viewers, we have a wide array of different ages. How would you describe the UN? What is the UN exactly?
If you allow me, and then not being influenced why I represent, and I've been working the last 23 years, actually, I would say that the UN is the best option that we have as a humanity to build peace at the moment. And I think this is what we represent, this is what we work for, and it's not only the UN staff that is part of it, it's all the countries that belong to the UN. It's 193 countries that are part of it. It is an organization that was, as you know, started in 1945 after the big war, and had basically three main objectives, right? To build peace, to promote human rights, and sustainable development of countries. This is exactly what we are trying to do since then. And of course, we need to strive for that as countries, as the UN members, to achieve that.
I love that. In that same regard, I know that because you said, we have 193 countries, there are a lot of global matters that the UN discusses. Would you give us some updates on, what are this current stance when it comes to the SDG progress?
Yes.
Maybe what's happening with the war in Gaza, the stance on the UN for these certain things?
Sure. It is, whenever one speaks about the UN, it's important to know what is the composition of the UN. We have three different instances, let's say. No, we have heard about the Security Council, for example. This is one of the main components of the United Nations. This is where all these matters on peace, for example, and security are discussed. This has a particular structure. It's formed by 5 permanent members and 10 invited countries that decide on issues related to peace, security, and their resolutions are binding for the countries, right? Then there is another instance, which is the General Assembly, where all these 183 countries participate. Each country has one vote there, and then all the resolutions comes there, and even though non-binding, have a moral obligation and also a follow-up mechanism for the countries. There are other instances like the Economic and Social Council, which all the UN agencies belong. All the UN agencies working here in Belize and all over the world are, managed through this council, and they are assessing what we are doing from human rights to crime prevention to poverty reduction. We usually see, when we see on the newspapers about Gaza, basically the Security Council, but it's, beyond what decisions are there, which are complicated, and countries are making hard decisions now. Even the General Assembly is calling for, access, for example, now to humanitarian aid in Gaza. They are making strong calls for the countries to make that decision, and this is difficult. But even though that, the support for the countries, the humanitarian support, what is needed to call for, access, the attention to refugees is there attended by the UN agencies working everywhere, and specifically now in the case of Gaza.
Perfect. And then in regards to the SDG progress, I know that we're not really where we want to be when it comes to getting to the 2030 agenda too as well. I think, we have a lot of goals that have not been reaching this spot, but I think that's a lack of data too as well for Belize specifically, where we don't necessarily have the progress that we want to make.
Yeah. One of the areas that is also, United Nations try to call countries is to assume commitments, right? And these commitments are part of what we know as the Sustainable Development Goals. Actually, this is a commitment that was assumed by countries in 2015. There are 17 objectives, and where country has committed to advance, basically these commitments, these objectives are in relation to how we are going to advance in our own development as countries. And of course, the since 2015 to date, there have been some advances, of course, in areas like education, health, reduction of mortality, climate change adaptation, different things. But there are other areas where we need to still continue to, striving more. For example, the protection of the environment. You see that now the COP28 is making strong decisions, about how we are going to develop the sustainability of the world, and that has a particular impact in the case of Belize and the Caribbean countries. The phase out of fossil fuels, probably this is the main decision that has been made in the COP28, even though you do not know if this is going to be enough to control the rise of temperature below 1.5, which is the target. But this, I think, is a huge step. And I think this is what all these decisions and commitments are about. I mean, set targets, strive for them, and then whenever we see where we're lacking and the speed that we need, then call the attention to that and try to make something. And this is probably the work not only of the UN but all the countries that are part of these discussions taking place now in Dubai.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Raul, for talking about the Sustainable Development Goals and putting some examples that people can relate to as regards to what's within the SDGs. Because as you mentioned, these are indicators, these are a framework where people are able to guide, or countries are able to guide themselves into making sure that every single human is able to live a fulfilled life, right? Because oftenly people would think, how can we get to this point? And there comes the SDGs saying, these are the things that you need to do for us to being able to have a clean environment, where we have gender equality, where we have no pollution, and all of these things. So it's definitely something that people should get involved, because in one way or another, we're all covered within the 17 SDGs that you mentioned. Let's bring the conversation from the UN to Belize, in the Belize context. Let's talk about the framework that the UN is guided from in Belize.
Sure. Do you know how many agencies are working here in Belize of the UN agencies? We have already 9 agencies, 9 of the UN agencies working on these objectives, and 10 other agencies working and having programs in Belize that are based, most of them basically around the Caribbean. And what they are doing is supporting countries in advancing in a framework. And actually Belize is part of a regional framework that is called the multi-country Sustainable Development and Cooperation Framework, that has established like 4 pillars of action, like from economic resilience to social advances to resilience to climate change, peace and security. These are the 4 pillars, and this, which is actually comprising English and Dutch-speaking countries in the Caribbean. That's why it's called multi-country.
Yes.
It has also a translation into the Belizean reality, because there is a country implementation plan for Belize that is prepared every year, addressing the same pillars. And in the same manner, this support provided by the UN agencies based here, which actually has a budget, is around 50 million for the year, right? There are around 181 programs implemented through this implementation plan in Belize.
Very good.
Different areas from education, health, attention to migrants, refugees, name it. I mean, all the pillars of development are attended there. And besides that, and what is more important and also to highlight, is that the role of the UN is complementary to what the governments themselves do.
Yes.
Right? And what you have in this country implementation plan, as we call it, is complementary to a national medium-term development strategy of Belize, which is the same period, 2022-2026. It's an important period to remember.
Yes.
Because this is a period in which all the actions are going to take place. So we are complementing what the government of Belize has set themselves to do. And I think that the action is taking place very actively with very tangible results so far, in different areas, from education, as I mentioned, and supporting, after the impact of hurricanes, providing cash transfer to the affected population, working with the population of refugees. I was on the weekend visiting one of the areas where many refugees live, and then to see, the things that are going and the amnesty process that is taking place, but also the needs, right? Still needs that are there and that we need to continue working on.
Yeah.
What I love so much about you being here, Mr. Raul, is just the fact that people don't know how big the UN presence is. in Belize? I know, like you mentioned, that we have 9 agencies that are in Belize, like they actually have an office in Belize. But there are 10 agencies that also, do work in Belize, but they don't have an actual office in Belize too as well. So it's like 19 UN agencies that you're looking at that are putting funds into Belize, and that, like, really, if you do the estimates of the millions of dollars that are put into programs for us to, like, actually develop in different pillar areas, like you've mentioned before, like,
Yes.
people don't understand how important the UN has been to our overall development. Of course,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. This is the perfect slide to talk about it. These are non-resident agencies, and
Yes.
these are resident agencies. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen these names before. They know and love them, and they don't know, like, they're really putting a lot of funds into making sure there's development, of course, with the government's support too as well. But it's really great to see the presence happening. Kev talked about trying to zoom into Belize. I know you mentioned, like, you were with, I think it was maybe with UNHCR, doing with the refugees. There's the Amnesty. There's so much different areas that you can see, like UNICEF deal with so much funding with the Department of Youth Services.
Yeah.
There are all these different areas that you can see their implementation, or there's funding happening.
181 programs you mentioned,
Yes.
right? Which is huge.
Yes.
So can you talk a bit about some of what these programs are feeding
Sure.
into?
Well, first, you show that screen where all these agencies are, right? And you see that the 19 agencies, each agency has its specific mandate in areas of work, right? Like that's why the Secretary General of the United Nations created what he calls the reform process, where he sees that basically the message that together we do more than individually,
Yes,
right?
that is
That's
true.
the role of the resident coordinator here. My role here in Belize and everywhere, we do have a resident coordinator and a support office that is called the Resident Coordinator's Office. To make all these agencies that are based in Belize and in any country to work together, to develop joint programs together, and then to be more complementary and effective in achieving the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals. That's my job. And in addition to this, to give you an example of what you asked about different programs, yesterday we were closing one of the programs that is called the Spotlight Initiative. It's a program that started 3 years ago with the cooperation of the European Union. There are 3 agencies working there together, working for ending the violence against girls and women.
Yeah.
And this has been very direct action, a lot of supportive action for the government of Belize in an issue that affects very deeply in some families, right? And has impacts that are beyond one generation sometimes. And the examples and testimonies that we had during these conversations were moving. So this is, for example, one of the areas that we do together, addressing gender-based violence, not only through the actions of attending the victims, which is very important, but also carrying out education programs to prevent that, for example, through the work of UNICEF, or developing normatives and regulations that allow, the processing of these cases through, for example, the United Nations Development Program, which is another agency, and also the specific areas of gender. How do we approach this issue from the gender considerations through the UNFPA, the Population Fund? So this is an example of what we can do together,
Yes.
more than individual agencies going together towards one objective. And like that, there are different agencies. We are now working with the Institute for Statistics, for example. One of the things that is usually important to remember is we cannot advance if we do not measure, if we do not know where we stand. So, this work with the statistics office, we are allowed to see how much we have advanced and where are the pockets where we need to continue working more. So, things like supporting development has always different entry points and calls for the joint action, not only from the UN agencies, but from different partners, which is actually what is happening, around these 181 programs. There are 37 donors or countries supporting these 181 programs. So
Wow.
more than the ones that are based here, also funds coming from different donors abroad, and 70 partners in the country. Not only UN agencies, but also governments, civil society organizations, individual partners. So this is, is the idea of what is the UN, right? Working together, we have an objective, so we have to put things together and then the clearer and nicest and more noble objective is to help people to be better the conditions of people. That's what we are for.
I love it.
That's true. And I love that this conversation, for one, is highlighting the magnitude of the United Nations and the contribution that it makes to different countries and different spaces, and also the multi-sectoral approach, which I'm really glad that you're hitting that point, because often whenever we talk, for instance, I work in healthcare, in HIV, and often people would say, oh, it's only a health issue, but whenever we talk about the determinants that can contribute to somebody being HIV positive, really calls for many persons to get involved. And that's what the UN is doing. You know, it's bringing all these UN agencies, but finding local partners to say, all of us have a role to play in a particular program that we're working on. So with that, how do people get involved in being part of the United Nations process?
Different ways. I seen, for example, in the case of Belize, I was mentioning about the visit I had to the area of Trio in Toledo, and I saw, for example, organizations working with the UN on a voluntary basis. I saw a teacher that is helping students after school to promote some, to level the areas of education where they need some support and they need that complementary work at, outside the school on a voluntary basis. This is one of the areas that you can be engaged, like through your work, through your interest. Also at the school level, there have been experiences where schools also become like advocates for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You have seen many advocates, and the most famous one is this Greta Thunberg. You have seen her advocating for climate change and be an activist on defending this. And this is, for example, one of the important lessons that we learn from the role of youth. That youth are there to call all of us, including the UN agencies, including the government representatives, to take action, to not forget to do things. And the activism of youth is quite important. And that activism can be born everywhere, from home, schools, associations. This is important. Other ways of getting engaged to the work or engaging the Sustainable Development Goals is through the civil society organizations. I've also met many people working in this organization, also advocates, calling, participating in meetings, bringing the voice of who they represent to the meetings where decisions are being made. Do not forget that all these Sustainable Development Goals built around policies. If we can change policies in a country, then we will make some advances towards that end, right? We have seen that in education here in Belize. We have, for example, now a few days ago, they have extended the level of education, secondary education, to 14 to 16 years old.
Yes.
That's immensely important. And that comes also not only from a government receptive to this importance, but also advocates at the community level raising the importance of this. So that type of engagement is, I think, we need something that we need to maintain. Giving spaces to youth, giving spaces to advocates is also what we also try to strive for.
Yeah.
I love it. Mr. Raul, I know you said in the beginning that you've been in the UN system for 23 years.
Yeah.
I know we're talking about the UN resident coordinator, your role and these things, but to just get a little personal, let's talk a little bit just about how has that journey been for 23 years? Like, is there any highlights that you would have to say? Because 23 years is a great service to, I'm sure, many other countries and so forth. What has that been like for you?
Well, I started indeed 23 years ago, and my area of expertise was related to disaster risk reduction and also the emergency and coordination after disasters. And I brought this idea first of, how disasters impacting the lives of people, how important it is to provide or to have mechanisms in place to provide, the emergencies and humanitarian support after the impacts of disasters. I've been part actually, and now that you ask, for example, the highlights of what I've done, I participated in what is called the United Nations Disaster Assessment and Coordination. It was a group that mobilized immediately after disasters happened to support countries in, identifying the needs and then mobilizing resources for attending those needs. So I had a chance to be after the Hurricane Ivan here in the Caribbean, I was in Jamaica. Actually, it was pre-positioned before the hurricane stayed. It was the first mission that was pre-positioned before the hurricane struck the country. It was impressive. But I also saw the impacts of the earthquake in Haiti. I mean, I mobilized 2 days after the earthquake in 2010, and saw also the impact of that earthquake and how much it's important not only to attend humanitarian needs, but also to take measures to prevent that these hazards that exist develop into disasters, right? And that's what I've done the last 10 years, trying to build those capacities in countries to avoid that the natural environment in which we live become disasters. I mean, hazards have been always there.
Yeah, we can't control that sometimes, but we can put things in place so that we can be a little bit more safe.
Or making better decisions, right? Sometimes what we say is usually a huge part of a disaster is man-made. Actually, is a decision or human-made, and then the decision that we made is to place a town in a river basin or deforestation. All those create an unmet hazards, but we can prevent that. We can make measures, and this is something that, from attending humanitarian impacts to preventing that is very clear that we can do a lot by preventing and learning, and teaching, and providing additional and political support to countries to move around that prevention.
Well, congratulations on your 23 years of being in the UN system, Mr. Raul. And of course, hearing your story and how you got involved, I think it's motivating for anybody to find what's your cause, what's your passion, and fit yourself within the United Nations. I think first you start by volunteering, identifying which organization you belong to, identifying your tribe, and seeing how you can just get involved in the daily dialogue that happens within the United Nations space. So that was motivating, and I hope that people are really paying attention and grabbing notes of what we're talking about. We're talking about the United Nations, the role that the United Nations plays in Belize, the many programs that it supports. And I'm saying this because it's time for us to do our 2 giveaways.
Yes!
Because, I mean, we got to spice things up here on Sun Upon 7, right? So there's 2 questions and how the giveaway is going to work. The person that answers the right questions on our Facebook live chat, you're going to be a lucky winner of...
There's like a goodie bag.
A goodie
so it's not
bag.
just like there's several stuff. Mercy did an excellent job by making sure.
Can you share what it has?
Oh, yes. Okay. I love it.
It has a notebook. I hope
So
I get
yes,
one.
there's a notebook here that talks about your decade of action. There is a beautiful water bottle, and of course, because we have to be hydrated. Ooh,
Because kidney stones the boat.
ooh, you silly, yes. And this is I think this is my favorite here.
my
I don't
gosh.
want to put it out too much, but guys, there
It's
is
a
a
coffee mug.
beautiful coffee mug.
The color is beautiful.
This color is beautiful. I don't want Mercy to say you messed up my group.
All right, that's okay.
gift,
That's
but
okay.
this is beautiful. And you guys, we have 2 giveaways for you, and of course you get the bag too as well. Oh, and a keychain. There's more.
Okay.
Okay, so are you guys ready? Please also, if you're answering the question, can you please put it in just one answer in the chat? One answer, again, I repeat, in the chat. And the first question will be, how many sustainable development goals are there? Super easy question. Mr. Raul mentioned it like several times. You showed it on the screen. How many sustainable development goals are there? While you're putting it in the chat there, I think it's super easy, guys. You can't miss out on that good stuff. While we're waiting for the answer, Ms. Raul, would you mind sharing, because I know you talked about so much great work that the UN agencies are doing. Where can people find like publications and stuff like that to keep informed on what the UN is doing?
No, as the Resident Coordinator's Office, we do have a role also to communicate and provide access to people that is interested. So we do have a website. It's the BelizeUN.org. So you can look for that information in that website. So always invited to be part of it, not only to get information, but also use that information to take action, okay? To participate, to be engaged in the Sustainable Development Goals. So we will always be there to also engage with you.
I'm putting it in the chat, guys, for you guys to be able to engage. There's so much publications there. Everything that Mr. Raul said, you can actually go back and verify and see all of the amazing work that these UN agencies are doing in our country.
All right, so while the persons are responding, we're going to wait for our production team to pin who answered the thing right, because sometimes the internet is slow on my phone and I don't want to get in trouble. So we put the job on the production team to let us know who is the winner, and then they're going to let us
no,
know.
it's not 5 sustainable development goals.
And it's not 3, and it's not 181.
It's not a small number. It's a good amount of numbers. It's a
And
good
it's not
number.
181.
It's not. No, it's
Yeah,
not
because somebody put 181. Right?
No.
Right. So while the answer gets, can you read the next question, Ren?
Yes. So we talked about the presence of the UN agencies in Belize. We showed a slide that had the ones that are in country and the others that are not in country but are still doing valuable work to contribute to our society. I'm asking you for the next bag to list 5 UN agencies that are in Belize. And we listed so many. You guys know these names. You've heard them so many times before. 5 UN agencies in Belize. Perfect, easy question. And guys, the gift is so worth it. So definitely, I want you to note that.
Yeah, so they have to get the names right. Acronyms are accepted.
Acronyms are acceptable because I think if they start actually spelling it out,
They will not make it.
they will not make it
on
in time
Showtime.
right now. That's why the acronyms are so fun. But Mr. Salazar, would you mind sharing any message to the public? Anything that you want to tell them when it comes to the UN, or what you would want them to know as we're getting ready for the season, Christmas season, and so forth? Anything?
What can I tell you? I think that you see the world today.
Yes.
We are having in a very, very difficult moments now, crisis, wars, where the UN relevance is becoming and being tested, right? We do know that what we do now, the activism of people, the participation of people, advancing the sustainable development goals is what is going to be, at the core and the heart of what the UN does and the relevance for the countries.
That's true.
So everyone, is invited to be part of it, participate in it in the different ways that we have been discussing. And also very much to call for, in this season, just to call for peace, to give our thoughts for peace for the next year. And I think we are sure that something good is going to come out. Some ways are going to be found to support people that need. But I think always pray. The ones that like to pray, all the ways in which we can support that thought for peace would be always very, very supportive and important. So
And the ones that
peace to everyone at home.
And the ones that believe in action to
Yes.
reach out to the UN, send those letters to the government, hold the systems accountable, because thoughts and prayers go hand in hand, right?
Yes.
One cannot happen without the other.
That's
so
true.
thank you so much for that reminder. Mr. Raul, it was a pleasure to have you on our couch. So how are the...
I'm looking at there's a lot of people answering right now. What I'm seeing right now, though, also for Javier, you're so close. UNEP is not a UN agency. All the others are correct.
It's a letter before E.
So you were very, very close. I see here.
So let's give it a hint. Some work with children, some work with women, some work in sexual and reproductive health, some work with refugees, they work with migrants.
Yeah, so he's getting good answer. But so we have for the 17, I'm seeing here on my screen, Alejandro Perez said 17. The first person to say 17 on the screen here for me, Alejandro Perez. Ms. Kathleen, you were right afterwards. I'm so sorry. Right afterwards. And you can't give 3 UN agencies, guys. We're asking for 5 UN agencies. Although your 3 are correct, we're looking for 5 of them. So you have to add 2 more to that. Don't split up the answers. We were so thankful to have you, Mr. Salazar, here.
Thank you for the
diving
invitation.
into interesting conversation about the UN, giving us that context, the history too as well, diving into what we have signed on to, and basically, what's the implementation plan, our frameworks. There's so much you can get and unlock from this conversation. And of course, we have giveaways. We're still waiting for the last giveaway, guys. You're close, but you're not there. You're at 4.
You almost had it.
You almost had it, guys.
almost had it.
awesome goodie bags here, courtesy of the UN Resident Coordinator Office too as well. And you can find them. They're also located in Bamapan. You can look up on the website, unbelize.org, and you can check out all the publications that they have there in case you want to learn anything about the UN. For young people, I think this is a perfect time to advocate, join spaces. If you would like to have a position in the UN, it is possible. Start with some internships, volunteering, and getting involved as much as possible. You deserve a seat at the table. You have to go and get it.
That's true. And I have to tell everyone, wait, no UNDP. I mean, UDP and PUP are not part of the UN system.
No. But again, you guys are so close. The abbreviations are off by like a letter, and I can't give you if it's off by a letter, guys. But yes, with that, we're going to continue monitoring the chat because we have given away one of the... Okay, so... All right, we have somebody that won. Lynch Dawn. I gave extra. She gave more than 5. She gave 6.
Okay, so PAHO is not part of the UN system.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Yep. Oh, yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yes, it is.
So PAHO, UNICEF, UNHCR, UNDP, and UN Women. Excellent job. So, Lynch Dawn, you are in fact the winner of the next bag.
Yes.
So,
can you please send us your real name on a private message so we can make sure that we pin your gift properly?
and Alejandro Perez, you are the winner of the first one. And Lynch, so can you please send us your name to us? Well, I'm writing it down so we can have that for these goodie bags. They're going to be at our office, so you can collect them between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. here at the studio and get your goodies from the UN Resident Coordinator Office.
That is true. So, Mr. Raul, thank you so much for
Thank you very
joining us
much.
this Wednesday on Sun Up on 7. Wish you all the best. And I hope this is not the last visit. So you're welcome whenever there's any good news coming from the UN or any news to share from the UN, as a matter of fact. So I
Glad to
wish
join
you
you.
and your staff a festive holiday season. Enjoy your Christmas.
Thank you.
And we look forward to what 2024 is going to bring from the United Nations.
Exciting stuff.
Yes.
The results are going to be posted for 2023 very soon, and we're going to have them back to dive into what has been the presence of the UN for 2022, guys. So with that, we send you off, and we're going to be back soon with some,
Thank you, Ron.
somebody's going to
Kevin.
be highlighted. So
Yes.
stay tuned for all that. We'll be right back.
Yeah.